I am Professor Tony Diaz, el libro traficante, and this is Nuestra Palabra, Latinos having their say. We are talking to the spotlight for the Nuestra Palabra session on Saturday, April 19th at noon at 5503 Lawndale, Houston, Texas, 77023 on the East End in Segundo Barrio. How appropriate to have this event in a legacy Mexican neighborhood as we talk to Dr. Christopher Carmona and discuss his powerful book that brings to life Mexican history. It is part of the series El Rinche. This is volume 3. This is Matanza. Hey, Christopher, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Tony.
Tell folks where you are right now.
Right now, in San Antonio. Um, so yeah, I mean, right now we're just kind of like trying to tour this book out. So we're getting started here. Yeah, for sure. Just dropped January, so we're barely into.
Congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
It's an exciting book. We're so happy to be hosting you. A couple firsts for us. We typically don't do young adult books. Now we're going to begin, but we're going to talk about how this is a book that's really powerful for young readers, but it really fulfills the need in all of us for more of our history and representation. Additionally, it's a Saturday event so that we can reach out to more young readers as well as their parents because they may be too young to drive, but also for educators as well. I think this is a great book that we want to incorporate. And we're talking earlier, it really is time for a Mexican hero. And this book, which delves into Mexican history, especially during the period of 1910 to 1925 or so, when we were vilified and persecuted in different ways here in Texas. But you bring out a Mexican hero from that time. And you mentioned before that at Comic Cons, you got a lot of great reception. I was asking you, why do you think at these comic book expos that a lot of people gravitate towards the hero you created?
Well, for one, it's they don't have a lot of representation for Latino superheroes out there. I mean, there certainly is a market there in the comic book world. Certainly not as much in the literary world, right? But I think what really they really like about these books in particular is that it ties into history, the real history of what happened to our people. What happened, during the Matanza, which is, the title of the third volume. And that kind of history and that kind of representation is something that they haven't gotten before. And so when we throw it in here, this kind of hero, right? So they might have heard about, Mexican Americans fighting against, or even being, oppressed and losing everything, but they don't know that there were people who fought back, right? There are people who fought, and so this character of the Rinche character comes out of this tradition of, these kind of heroes, right? It comes out of a lot of the history that we have here, and the way we preserved them back in the day, right? And which we still kind of do today is through song, right? Through corridos back in the day, right? And that's where our histories were told, right? And the histories and corridos are really, these type of ballads about these outlaws, right? These heroes that people were venerating. It wasn't in the history books, right? You had to sing them in different people, and so this character kind of comes out of that tradition. And I think where a lot of people gravitate toward that because there isn't a lot of representation, right? There isn't a lot of representation out there. I mean, and so I think when we go to like places, presenting at a Comic Con and things like that, the audience, even though it's mostly comic book audience and minor novels, they gravitate toward them because it is different. It is something that they have not seen, and then I mean, representation matters, right? Being able to see a superhero who is Latino makes a difference for a lot of kids who don't have that.
I also want to remind folks, like as you mentioned, this isn't also just a thrilling plot line. You are an expert in Mexican history. You are a professor, a PhD. Additionally, we were there, in the trenches fighting for Mesoamerican studies here in Tejas. But it's harder and harder to get access to these books and stories. So I think that's a great reason for folks to come out to support. We're also going to have a GoFundMe where folks can pitch in so we can get a classroom set for a community library and book club out here in Houston. But let's dive into this. Tell folks about the title El Rinche and tell them a little bit about what Matanza is about.
Sure. So the title of Rinche, for those who don't know, is a term that was given by the people, la gente, for referring to the Texas Rangers, referring to these people that were oppressing, and for a lot of people, Mexican Americans, for most of the Texas Ranger existence, they have been seen as kind of terroristic force, right, like the KKK for Mexicans in a lot of ways. And during this time in particular, this is when the name came about, as a slur for these men that were indiscriminately killing and stealing lands from Mexican peoples at this time. And so the title Matanza itself refers specifically to this era, which takes place between 1910 and 1920 approximately. And it's a time in South Texas where there was this kind of massive land grant for take, because at this time Mexican Americans still own most of the lands in South Texas, and there was a concerted effort by a lot of the American corporations, white ranchers, to take the lands from these Mexican Americans, and they utilized the Texas Rangers to do it. So the people ended up calling this specific time La Matanza, right, the massacre. And so we're looking at a time when upwards of thousands of Mexican Americans were killed, lynched, and had their land stolen. And so this in particular, the book itself, the volume 3, looks at the bloodiest year, which is 1915. And 1915 is usually the year that they really call the Matanza. That's what kind of where it got its name, because that was the most concentrated amount of killings that happened. They estimated somewhere around 500 people were killed in one summer. And so this book takes place in that year, and they're trying to deal with these characters are trying to deal with the increasing violence and the increasing presence of the U.S. military, which is true. The military did come down, and of course the basically unchecked powers of the Texas Rangers and the damage they were doing. So that's where this book really is set in, is in that era.
Now, you set up the historical part again, really well researched, consistent with what we may have been studying at higher levels of education. Folks aren't getting this in schools. Break down the superhero in it, because it really is clever. Some of the skills that he
Mhm.
possesses.
So the character himself is kind of a mixture of a lot of things, but he is on the cover. He is on the cover of it. He is dressed like very much in ninja-esque attire. He has ninja skills because during this time in South Texas there was a large colony of Japanese who came there, and the Japanese were involved in a lot of the South Texas families, Mexican families. And they did help out in the Mexican Revolution. They taught the soldiers the martial arts, and they also worked in munitions. But so while having these actual the real life, I was able to bring in this type of world, like the Japanese mysticism, and bring in this character who kind of fits into this kind of ninja magic world, right? And so it's kind of what we have here is this character who's created as this ghost-like figure, right? Who is not, and who kind of is able to in a lot of ways shift in and out of through shadows and things like that. But he keeps this kind of ghost-like figure throughout this, what gives him this kind of mystique as the superhero. And so this, the character himself is an amalgamation of that, and a lot of Native American, because his partner is Native American. Well, there's actually a whole team that is basically like Team Rinche in a lot of ways. That is a mixture of Japanese as well as Mexican and African American peoples that are and African Americans who were on during this time. And of course, so you have some real life figures in this as well, like Covite is in this book, and so you have a lot of this, this character who becomes this kind of figure, right? This ghost-like, kind of ninja figure that has borrowed a lot from those different things and put into this creating this character.
So cool. It really is a fun read. We do want to give people a preview of it, but we want them to know that you can meet the author here in Houston, Texas on Saturday, April 19th at noon. It's totally free. You can visit us at 5503 Lawndale, Houston, Texas. The zip code is 77023. Additionally, you'll be able to purchase the book at nuestrapalabra.org, and you'll be supporting a Latino publisher, Latino writers, and helping Nuestra Palabra continue to give back to the community. We also are looking for more book clubs and organizations to work with. We have a mobile bookstore. We go out to events. We'll be at the LULAC District 8 Convention. We just were earlier at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce annual luncheon. We go to the Mayor's Hispanic Advisory Board. Of course, we've also got the community center, so we'd love to come to you as well and bring you cool stuff like this. So, Christopher, if you'd be so kind, would you please read an excerpt from Rinche Volume 3, Matanza?
Definitely. So the scene I'm going to read from here is this is actually I guess a depiction of a real double murder that occurred during this time, and this was the murder of two men, Jesus Bazan and Antonio Longoria. And Jesus Bazan was a Hidalgo County commissioner at the time when this murder happened. So this chapter itself is called "Something to Believe in." So it wasn't so much the bullets that ripped through their bodies. It wasn't that they were left in a ditch on the side of the road. Carry on for the vultures to pick at. Not even the dogs would go near the scene. It wasn't any of those things that unsettled the winds today. It was the sound of the click, click, click filling the dirt roads along the borderlands. That clicking sound sent a shiver down the spines of every Mexicano living in these lands. That sound that carried was white rage. White men with guns and badges. Brown lines never mattered except to punctuate the end of their bullets. Jesus Bazan had known about all of this for the past couple of years. The cucarachas, the cars that the Rinches rode around in, pierced the quiet ranch life of South Texas. They sent fear to everyone whose only crime was to be. But Jesus was a law-abiding man, a man of the people, a Hidalgo County commissioner. That would protect him, he believed. He needed to stay on the good side of the law, but on that night he would learn that he might try to be on the good side of the law, but the law was never on his side. He tried to stay neutral enough to be able to find resolutions for the many transgressions that the people had been experiencing. This year in particular, the violence, the dead piling up, the stench of not being able to be buried, it was everywhere. Still, Jesus had to believe that right would prevail. This is why he reported the stealing of his horses by Sedicios from his corral. He took his son-in-law, Antonio Longoria, along to report the theft. It was for the best, he told himself. He needed to get ahead of being accused of being a sympathizer, which in this death meant the wrath of the Rinches. So he decided to report it. As they were traveling through, Antonio had stayed quiet throughout the entire interaction between Jesus and the ranger captain Henry Lee Ransom. But when they were clear of the Lane Ranch, he turned to Jesus and said, "Do you think this is really going to do anything?" "No," Jesus says, "but it needed to be done, and I don't think that we're helping them." "Do they think that we're bandits? Do you really think they're that bad?" No, but these are precarious times, Antonio. We have to play it smart if we are to help La Gente. I have to believe that our influence in this community can do some good. I don't know. He says things are so much worse now than they've ever been. I mean, it has been so long since any Mexicano has ever found any sort of justice, and they've been shot down just for being brown. I know, but we have to trust that justice will prevail. Jesus reminded him. He shook his head again. It seems like white men are taking over, and we don't know who to trust. Jesus responded by saying, "There's still a good few white men around." But then it came, the dreaded sound that every Mexicano feared, that click sound of a ranger cucaracha. It was dark out. The moon was barely peeking from behind the August clouds, but the headlights from the cucaracha shone bright from behind them. Jesus looked back and said, "They must be on patrol tonight. Let's get off the road and let them pass." And so they did. They pulled their horses into the bush, and that's when they saw it, the shotgun coming from the window. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to Dr. Christopher Carmona. He has read an excerpt from Rinche Volume 3, Matanza. Of course, it is intense that this particular figure was a governmental official as well, who we would imagine would have been protected from this violence at the time, but you dramatize how that was not the case. And again, on so many different levels of history that is hidden, that we've not been privy to. Any parting words to invite some folks from Houston out to the reading who may be thinking either, what's ironic is that I think there'll be some folks who are adults think, oh, well, that's for kids.
Mm-hmm.
There may be young people who are intimidated by the fact that you're a PhD.
Mm-hmm.
What parting words might you say to that? Those individuals.
These stories, these stories are universal. I think that at any age you can kind of read this, right, and get different things out of it. Like kind of the best books do, right? When we look at things like Lord of the Rings, which is usually intended to be like a book for children, but it has so many levels that adults can read it and get things out of it. I think that's the kind of approach I took to writing these novels. Is yes, they are intended for a younger audience, but adults can certainly get a lot out of what's going on in these stories.
Great point. And we hope that folks will take advantage of this chance to meet the author. Again, thank you for chatting with us. We've been talking to Dr. Christopher Carmona. His book is titled El Rinche Volume 3, Matanza. Nuestra Palabra is bringing him to Houston, Texas, and that will be on Saturday, April 19th at noon at 5503 Lawndale, Houston, Texas, in Segundo Barrio, completely free. Can't wait to see you there, my friend.
All right. See you soon, Tony.
Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. This is Tony Diaz on behalf of Nuestra Palabra. We'll see you behind the book.